just wanna talk about some books. Hey, I just wanna talk about some books. Talk about some books. Talk about some books. Hey, I just wanna talk about some books with you.
Hey everybody, I'm Jo.
And I'm JoJo, and this is Canonical Nonsense.
And we are just two cups of Joe reading books.
So this season, we are exploring the dragon canon and the portrayal of dragons in modern fantasy. What are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about Blood of an Exile by Brian Naslund.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the background of this book?
Sure. So, Blood of an Exile is the first in the Dragons of Terra series. It is a trilogy. The first book was published in 2019, and all three books are currently out. Naslund says that he started the series during his long bus commute to work, with the simple premise that a man who is hungover has to go fight a dragon. He works at a tech company, and that is also very clear in this book, that you can see his kind of influence of the evils of capitalism seeping into this world. Anything you want to add?
I listened to this book more than read it, and I listened to it probably a couple hours on a bus, so that's just a neat little synergy. Not useful for the review.
After reading this book, I am curious if he felt weird writing some of the scenes on public transportation, because some of them are really, really graphic, to say the least. He says that he was heavily influenced by George R. R. Martin and Joe Abercrombie, as well as Scott Lynch, who are three grimdark writers. Some people debate over whether George R. R. Martin is actually grimdark, but this book is probably our first foray into grimdark.
Yeah, this is a spoiler-rich podcast, so if you don't want the book spoiled, go read it. We're going to give you a little bit of a spoiler for later in the podcast. We would recommend reading it. So if you're interested in it, go read it. We'll be here.
Yeah, just in case you want some content warnings before you leave us, if you want to read this book. Again, this book is the first book that we have read on the podcast that does lean into grimdark, so keep that in mind. And there are a lot of content warnings that we have, and I'm sure that there are some that we have missed. So just to give you a list, we have graphic depictions of violence, we have loss of body parts in multiple scenes, and this includes castration. We have impaling, torture, the death of multiple animals across multiple scenes, threat of sexual assault, and in-world sexism, as well as in-world racism, alcoholism, and a lot of vomit and excrement, just so you're aware of what's to come.
Yeah, I thought it was quite a lot, but I still very much enjoyed it. So if you're like, that sounds like quite a lot, yeah, but I think the story is worth it. And I think we're going to talk about it later. I think the graphic depictions of violence are important to the story it's telling. So,
like we said, we would recommend this book. So it definitely isn't something that we felt was, I don't know what the word is, because some of it felt a little gratuitous, but in a way that fit and made sense with the world.
We show these trigger warnings to give people a heads up in case this is something that bothers them. But none of these are I think game enders. It's just they should know that there's going to be a lot of people pooping in this book for some reason and losing limbs. If that's the thing that really, really bothers you, there are other books that we read that we would suggest.
I agree with that. There was a point when we were both reading this book where JoJo was like, I think this is a little grimdark. And I was like, I don't think it's grimdark. And then the end, it really popped off. And I was like, never mind. It's definitely grimdark. So there are also spaces in the book that are less intense than others. All right. Do you want to get into the plot next? Or do you want to talk about some themes?
We can sort of talk about that. Just some themes to think about as we go through. It's a long book and there's a lot of plot, and we're trying not to make this episode 3 hours. By we, I mean me.
Well, and me.
Yeah, we can talk.
We can talk.
So just some themes that we will mention, but probably not go into too many details in it is, do you want to talk about it? I feel like you have a better way of explaining these.
Oh, I'm not sure that I do. But one of the major themes that I was really surprised by when starting to read this book was that the environment was a pretty present, ever-present theme in the book. And this idea that systems of our environment are very complex, and specifically looking at the concept of the keystone species or the apex predator. And a keystone species, for those of you who don't know, is basically a species that if you remove them from a specific ecosystem, the entire ecosystem collapses. So a very well-known keystone species, and one that the author actually did reference in an interview that I listened to where he was speaking about his book, are the wolves in Yellowstone. So When wolves were reintroduced into Yellowstone, the environment really bounced back in a big way. And we're seeing that in other areas where wolves are being reintroduced and where wolves are not present, that the environments either spring back when they are returned to these areas or that they're really suffering. Not all keystone species are predators, it should be noted. Prairie dogs are a keystone species, as are beavers. So we have various different animals in our environment that are really important, not because of the direct things that they do in the environment, so wolves keep certain animal populations down, but because of the indirect influences that they have over their environments. And Brian Naslund in this book really was looking at dragons as these keystone species and how their effects on the environment trickle down to and touch every part of it, which is really quite interesting. And then we have this clash of environmentalism and progress. So there is a country in this book that is basically runs on dragon oil. So dragons produce this oil that is very expensive, that is very effective for various reasons. So think about these dragons as like a mix of wolves and whales, basically, because whale oil was so valuable.
When you say produce, to be clear, since we haven't talked about this book yet, you mean when they die, that you can kill them and use them for oil.
Yeah, they are hunted for their oil under the pretense that they're dangerous and they need to be removed from areas where they're harming humans.
They are harming humans. I think what this book does really well is balance this notion of naturalism and progress, where there are some problems with naturalism. We see it in the peasants in the more nature-based society, like not having as great lives as some of the peasants in the science-based society, but also the science-based society is basically going to crumble because they're so extractive that the ecosystem can no longer support them. So there's like a balance in this that I really like.
No, I think that's completely right. I think that there are themes of also science versus religion, but it's really handled in a way that doesn't feel like, well, one is better than the other. There are instances in the book where the kind of spiritual or superstitious beliefs of the people are in one country are keeping them from actually getting the help they need, like the medical aid they need, and allowing the scientific research that would actually assist them. And then there are issues in the country that is very technology forward and more modern, where we have issues of surveillance and issues of class systems that aren't as strict in the country that is a little bit less developed in terms of technology.
Yeah, the book balances a lot of complex ideas. But we should get to the plot, because that's what most people are here for.
Yeah. All right. So the book starts with a boy named Jolin preparing equipment for his master. So another Joe.
Yeah.
We learn that he is the apprentice to an apothecary and that they are situated in a small town called Otter Rock. And they're here because there is a poisonous snail that is infecting the river with its toxins and poisoning the people, therefore. He and his masters are currently trying to find a cure. And this is where we see that clash of superstition and science, where these people are a little bit apprehensive to seek these apothecaries for help because they believe that building these clay totems, which is this practice that this country does to their nameless gods, will save them rather than taking a potion from a singular person. However, they are not focusing on the snails today. Today, they are preparing to watch a dragon slayer kill a dragon that has taken up residence near the town. Do you want to talk about the dragon slayers?
So, Dragon Slayer is a punishment in this culture. It's basically a death sentence because dragons are about the size of farm animals to the size of large ships, it seems like. And they are a pest because they tend to eat livestock or kill people. So dragon slayers get dispensed when one is sort of annoying a town to kill them. Like I said, they're exiles from the country of Almira, which is where our story begins. They are tattooed with like 2 bars on their face, and then they receive tattoos for each dragon that they slay. So each dragon slayer has like a sidekick that's called a Forsaken Shield. We meet our dragon slayer face down on a bar table. We're also told that they can't sleep in beds, so it's quite possible that this is just the comfiest place that he's like legally allowed to sleep.
Can't sleep in beds, can't come within a certain distance of the capital, and cannot own a sword or ride a horse, I think.
Yeah, and it's pretty much implied that it's like kill on sight because you can see from the bars, so you'll be able to know if somebody a dragon slayer and is not where he should be. So we meet Burchard slumped over on a bar table after drinking the whole night away. Jolin basically like taps him with like the edge of a broom. He doesn't actually do that, but he's like, "Excuse me, sir, you have a dragon you need to kill," because dragons are easier to kill in the morning.
Yeah, Jolin's like, this guy does not sound like the legends because he is a legendary dragon slayer. We learned from Jolin. He's like, this guy has killed more dragons than any other dragon slayer. He is called Flawless Burchard for this reason. But he's gross. He's disgusting. He goes to get Burchard and take him to kill this dragon. And dragons are supposed to be slain, or they're best to be slain in the morning because they're still really sluggish. Most of them are cold-blooded. There's only one species that is not cold-blooded. And if they are able to get to their full mobility, they're extremely dangerous and hard to kill, especially this specific species that he is going to kill today, which is called a needle-throated Verdun. Burchard, our main character, has been slaying dragons for 14 years. He's killed over 60, which is unheard of. It's not something that anyone does. Most people die killing their first dragon. Lucky people maybe kill one or two. So this is very strange. They walk up together. So Jolin, his master, whose name is Morgan, Burchard's assistant, who's called the Forsaken Shield, whose name is Rowan, and their donkey walk up to out of town, and the townfolk are following them at a distance to the dragon's lair. He puts on his armor, which is described in detail. It's like lamellar. Is that how you pronounce it?
You're the medieval armor expert in the group.
Expert's a strong word. He puts on his armor and he also puts on a wooden carved mask in the shape of a jaguar. He is handed a spear as well as a rock that's really heavy. He walks over to the dragon's lair. He kind of looks around. He places the spear in the rock on the ground so it's sticking upright. He starts blowing a horn and the dragon then appears responding to the horn, which is apparently a thing. It's this noise that really bothers dragons. So then it agitates them and they are drawn to the horn. The dragon then jumps into the air to attack, and as he dives, he hits the spear right into his eye and he collapses onto the ground. As he's collapsing, his tail hits Burchard and it throws him. Burchard is knocked out by it. So Jolin and Morgan go to administer aid. There's a gash in his leg and the apothecary is asking Jolin, like, what should we do? And Jolin is like giving his thoughts. The master then leaves to go look at the dragon while he administers healing moss.
So moss is like a really important thing in this world, which will come into more use later in the story, but pretty much all wounds are packed with some sort of moss to help it heal. But Jolin, because the flawless Burchard is famous, decides to use the really, really good moss, which is called God's moss. It's apparently very expensive. They're only found in dragon warrens, but he's like, only the best for this famous dragon hunter. And as soon as he starts packing the wound, the dragon basically wakes up. He's already lost one eye in a previous fight with a dragon fighter who probably lost his life to this dragon, and now he's lost his other to Burchard. And he like gets up and Jolin looks at his master and is like, whoa, and then the dragon just clean knocks this guy's head off and it just like flies away. It's so funny. It's like, whoops, bloop, gone.
Yeah, and the dragon starts to wake up. Burchard then stands up and throws a spear through the dragon's head, and it describes like bone and brain splattering behind the dragon as the spear exits. And then Jolin looks back at him and he's like, what the fuck? Because that should be impossible. And Burchard's like, don't say anything.
Yeah, we basically learned pretty early on that Burchard has some sort of healing thing going on that's like impossible, but we don't find out about what exactly it is until later in the book.
Jolin then looks for his master's head, and we get some exposition about the funerary rites. This group of people believe that your soul needs to find the sea because their afterlife and their gods exist in the sea. So they put a seashell in their mouths when they die, and so he's trying to find his master's head so he can put a seashell in his mouth so that he can find the sea, but he's unable to find it. And this does weigh heavily on Jolin. They go back down to the town, and as they're doing that, the townsfolk they're ripping this dragon apart because under each scale is this little lump of oil, and that oil is so valuable. So we get back to town, and a sentinel appears from the capital. The sentinel gives Rowan a message at this point because Bershad has passed out again, and this message is from the king asking them to come to the capital. So this is unheard of again. Exiles in this book are not allowed to enter the capital under any circumstance, but the king is ordering him to go.
Jolin basically realizes at the end he was like 3 months from graduating or something like that.
Yeah.
And becoming an alchemist. And because he didn't make it, he has all of this training, but is basically a commoner with no land or nothing to like really show for it. So he's like pretty distraught.
Yeah, you really feel for Jolin.
Best character.
Yeah. The only other thing I want to mention is just about the dragons, because this is part of the world building that I think is quite interesting with the dragons, is that dragons' bodies rot within a period of just a handful of days. So the only thing on a dragon that doesn't just rot immediately is that oil. Everything else just goes, and it's called goes to rot within a number of days. So you can't harvest anything from a dragon. You can't, even their bones rot and just become covered in fungus and goo. But for whatever reason, Bershad has a dragon tooth dagger that was lodged into his stomach after a dragon that he was hunting bit him in the stomach, and it got lodged in his stomach. They pulled it out and it did not rot, and they don't know why. Apparently it is possible to preserve a dragon tooth, but it is an incredibly difficult process. So any attempt to preserve any part of a dragon other than the oil is extensive and very difficult, which I just thought was a really interesting part of the dragon world building, that these things can't be trophy hunted, really. They're really hunted more for their oil and to limit their interaction with humans.
Goes to rot was one of the things that I sort of highlighted early in my reading, because I was like, that's just a fun little fantasy way to say that, and adds a little bit to the tone of the book that kind of gets you in the mood for the fantasy. Like, there's a lot of really good craft in this book, and some of it is just like these small changes of phrase. Instead of saying the dragon rotted but like went to rot, is just like a fun little way of bringing this out and like making it more descriptive and making it more fantasy.
Oh yeah.
This book does a really good job of bringing you into this world, and it does it in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, I agree. We then meet a character named Garrett, so we cut away. He is currently swimming to shore under cover of darkness to a town called Mudwall, which is currently under siege. We get some description of how he blends in with other travelers as he moves towards the city. Some of this is done with just the way he's holding himself, the way he has like some molding paste in his bag that he covers his face with to hide. Some of his facial features, he's changing his accent to match the accent of the people around him as he is making his way to the city.
This book switches back and forth between POV. I think it's really interesting how they don't do a lot of characterization and difference between the POVs, but they do a little bit, where Bershad is backwards focused. Garrett's really like locked in, and you like see him go through all of his plans and his thought process of like how he's working through it, and you get a real sense that, you know, he's kind of doing like an Ocean's 11 in his brain all the time. He's a cool character.
Yeah, Garrett's character is really interesting. I agree with that. With Bershad, every time you're in his POV, you get a story about something that happened in his past. With Garrett, you get nothing. It's always what he is currently doing. You're not even necessarily sure all the time what his plan is at the end of what he's currently doing. You just see what he is currently doing, and it's very much this checklist of I'm doing this, and then I'm doing this, and then I'm doing this, and then I'm doing this. And it's really interesting. We get back to Rowan and Bershad. They arrive at Floodhaven, which is the capital, and are led inside the castle by the city warrens. We get a description of Bershad here. He is tall, he has long dark hair, he has green eyes, and he is scarred and has a pretty extensive tattoo going up one arm. So he gets a tattoo every time he slays a dragon, which again is over 60. I think it's 64 at this point. Very romanticy protagonist coded.
The tattoos reminded me a lot of Xaden, which is just funny. You can't take the fantasy out of romanticy or whatever.
His tattoo also reminded me a little bit of Kaladin because he does have information inscription on his wrist describing why he was exiled. So the very base of the tattoo says that he's exiled, who he is, what his past was. So we learn that he was betrothed to the princess of Almira before he was exiled. And then it says that he is extremely violent, prone to bloodlust on his tattoo, which is like the Shash brand on Kaladin. So just like a trope that we see a lot in fantasy.
Yeah, he gets in and everyone's like, "You're too stinky to me, the king." So he like gets bathed and we find that his hair is, I think he's basically just got dreads, with like rings and stuff in them.
In the interview that I was listening to when I was writing notes for this episode, the author says that he envisions Tom Hardy at the very beginning of Mad Max Fury Road when he still had like his hair was really matted and dreaded
Oh, what a good movie.
as Bershad. What a good movie, yeah.
I think honestly, he would also make a good Bashad.
Yeah, he would. Also a movie about like a story about environmentalism.
With badass women.
With badass women, yeah. Yeah, so he's like nasty. It's the book describes when he gets into the water turns black and the attendants are like, ugh. And they have to go and get new water and fill the bath again. So he meets with the king. The king's name is Herzog. And the king asks him, the king's like, hey, so my daughter's been kidnapped, my youngest daughter, not the daughter that you were betrothed to. And this daughter's name is Kira. And he asks Bershad to sneak into Baleria, which is the country who kidnapped her, to rescue her, as well as kill the emperor. And then they're like really like petty and bitchy to each other. And he gives Bershad back his sword, which again, exiles are not allowed to have. But his sword is this really important heirloom for him. Then he's like, it got rusted because I kept it in a room that flooded. Sorry. And Bershad's really pissed. He's thinking about how to kill him, and he's like, well, I'll die too, but at least he'll also be dead.
It's worth saying that one of the things that they're bitchy about is that Rashad has been fighting this whole time and he's like really buff and strong, and the king is dying from some sort of chronic disease or ailment. It's unclear, but he's coughing up blood or whatever and just like looks really gross. Part of the thing is like this guy is on his last legs.
Yeah, and strength and battle prowess are really valued in this society. Herzog was a warlord. In the beginning of the empire, there was a war with Baleria like 30 years ago. He was one of the big figures who was able to beat back that invasion and then put down the civil unrest that happened as a result of it. So the society and the other high lords really value physical strength and ability to fight over anything else. So the fact that the king is starting to really decay physically is, the author knows what he's doing, But anyway, he is initially refusing. He's thinking about killing him, but then Ashlyn, who was his betrothed, appears and she's talking to him as well. We learn that they really were once in love, and she's like, sleep on it, think about it. He's able to interpret she makes like a facial expression that he's able to interpret that she's like, I have more to say to you, but I can't say it here.
He thinks about how he could tell everyone the true secret of his banishment, including Ashlyn, but he doesn't want to share it. So we have to wait until later in the book to unlock his true tragic backstory.
Yeah, we only know that there was some kind of massacre that he was responsible for in a place called Glenlock Canyon. When he was 18, he was like a baby. So Ashlyn comes to his room later. She tells him that the Balerian king not only kidnapped her sister, but also plans to eradicate all of the dragons. And we learn that the dragons, they migrate to breed. And every 5 years, there's a great migration. And one of the main places they go is in the country of Baleria. The king of Baleria, or the emperor of Baleria, told Ashlyn that he created all of these ballistas that can be reloaded so quickly that they can basically kill a dragon every 30 seconds. And what he wants to do with this is he wants to obtain all of this dragon oil, which he figured out a way to refine it to the point where it's 10 times more efficient, and then have a monopoly on that dragon oil.
So Ashlyn is actually like a really talented scientist who does like a lot of important field work and is like an obsession with dragons. Is just kind of like the #1 dragon biologist in the world. She's really cool. And she basically explains how dragons are. She's like, I've looked at my notes and I've done all the research, and dragons are a keystone species. It's a little bit like an ecology dissertation out of nowhere, but like I don't mind a lot of exposition early in the book, especially if it sets up stakes. So
I think I have the quote where she's talking about it. So here's the quote. The gray-winged nomads, which is the name of a dragon, are the only predators in the region that threatened Almerian black bears. So she's talking about why the red snails are overtaking this river system in Otter Rock. When the bears no longer had to watch the skies and scurry off the riverbank every time a dragon's shadow swooped through the valley, they started gorging themselves on otter meat before each winter. It only took 2 seasons before they'd nearly eradicated the whole population. You can ride that river for weeks without ever spotting a single otter. The otters ate fish, insects, worms, whatever they could find, really. But they also ate a rare type of red-shelled snail that only lives in that province. The snails are poisonous to most creatures, but the otters are immune. Without a natural predator, the snail's rate of reproduction went out of control. There are stretches of the river north of Otter Rock that are so choked with snails that you can use their shells as a bridge to cross the current. The toxic is harmless to humans in small doses, but it causes rashes, boils, seizures, and hallucination when consumed in large quantities. And so she goes through different dragon species and talks about how they affect the ecosystems. And another dragon species she talks about is called a snub-nosed blackjack, which lives in the jungle that Bershad is from. And they suck on a fungus that grows on the roots of the trees because it has properties that help with their sinus problems, because these dragons are known to have sinus problems. And by doing that, they keep the fungus from spreading and overtaking the trees. And if those dragons were to be eradicated, the trees would all die and it would destroy this huge jungle, which would cause really devastating effects to the rest of the world, basically. It would be like destroying the Amazon.
Yeah, she also talks about how basically Valeria has already kind of fucked themselves by killing enough of their dragons, and that's sort of why they're starving and maybe want to take over their country. It's worth saying that after they finish talking about dragons, it makes them so fucking horny that they fuck standing up.
So we do also learn, before we talk about that, we do also learn that Bershad and Ashlyn, before he was banished, would go out together and study dragons. Like they would go out and they'd track down dragons, they'd track their warrens, they'd track their lairs. Ashlyn's dissected many dragons. We learn that he has this real love for dragons, and the fact that he has to kill them as part of his exile is this added level of torture that most dragon slayers would not feel at all.
And then they fuck standing up.
Yeah, but then they have sex.
They're just so horny and they love each other so much that he just takes off her dress and then they lay down on the carpet and then they maybe do it again because, this is a book where people fuck in it,
Yeah, it's actually a really sweet scene. It's not described in a way with a lot of detail.
I always say lacy wafting curtains. You sort of see them through is silhouetted by some curtains and you understand that two silhouettes are becoming one.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate description of this scene. So Bershad decides that he will go through with it. He is going to try to rescue Kira and kill the Emperor. And Ashlyn's like, okay, there's a ship waiting for you on the dock. There are 3 people on board. You can trust one of them. And the other 2, you can't trust. So one is a widow. Do you want to explain what widows are?
Yeah, widows fuck. There's such a cool concept to that created in this book. Honestly, there's a lot of this book that feels a little comic booky, and I do mean that as a compliment.
Yeah.
And one of them are widows, which kind of seem like Marvel's Black Widows. So a bunch of girls are taken to this island fortress that belongs to Papyrian, which is just a different empire.
Yeah, just to be clear, Ashlyn is half Papyrian. Her mother was Papyrian and married Herzog as part of an alliance. So her family lineage is from that country, and that is the only reason that there are even widows in Almeria, and they were sent to be the bodyguards of Ashlyn and Kira.
Yeah, but they're just basically super competent assassins. Though they make their armor from shark skin. They have like a tanning process that makes it super good and fitted, and they're trained with slings. They basically can shoot people dead, which they do a bunch in this book, and it fucking rules.
Yeah, they explode heads.
Yeah, they explode some heads. And then also they are trained to basically just start like slicing arteries through chainmail. So they talk about how a widow will basically dance around a fighter while his boots are filling up with blood and they don't know that they're dead yet because the cuts are so quick and they're just so full of adrenaline. So they like fight them until basically larger fighters just like basically keel over from blood loss.
Yeah, they're really cool. The widows are great. And this widow's name is Vera. And that's one he can trust. He can trust Vera. The other two are a thief that they pulled from the dungeons, and the reason they are using this thief is because he is Balerian, and he is able to sneak into the palace at the capital of Baleria, which is, again, something that's unheard of, so they're using him. And then the third is a lord. His name is Yanmar Greeler. He is the son of Eldon Greeler, who was the man who took over the Danewood and Deepdale, which is Bershad's home, after Bershad was exiled and his father was killed. So he has a little bit of a beef with this guy. But they need him to get into the city or into the other country because he's able to secure passage. And then Ashlyn does tell him that if he's not able to do this, if he dies, she's going to just raise an army and invade Baleria.
Yeah. She also says that she'll give him back the Danewoods, which is his ancestral home.
He's like, I don't think I could be around that many people anymore. He has a drinking problem that becomes very bad when he is in cities. He doesn't seem like he has the urge to drink as much when he is in the wilderness, but when he's around other people, he tends to have cravings.
Yeah, the whole thing about Bashad is like whether or not he is gonna turn into some like murderous animal or if he's able to be a person or something. And you sort of see that contrast here where he's like, I'm not who I used to be. I'm a different person now.
Yeah.
That's how I imagine he talks.
Yeah, no, we cut back to Garrett, who I didn't write this in the notes, but then you added it, and I think, yeah, it is pretty interesting. He kills a warden, so like soldiers are called wardens in this book. He kills a warden as he is pooping over a shithole in a camp, so that is described pretty graphically.
Yeah, he's drunk too, so it sounds like a messy shit.
Yeah, he slings a rope around his neck, he lassos him, and then yanks him over the pit and strangles him and then steals his clothes. And disguises himself and then like the molding paste on his face and then sneaks through the camp of soldiers. He's able to get past them with some sneaky lies and climbs a wall. And then he murders the lord there, who is the one that's protecting the city against the siege that's happening. And then when he goes to wash off the disguise, a dragon pops up. He's sitting at a lake or a stream. I think it's like a pond or a lake. He's washing off his disguise and a dragon just kind of comes up and bites him in the arm. He's able to get the dragon to let go, but part of the dragon's tooth lodges in his arm and stays there.
It's kind of funny because a thing in this book is Elmira is saturated with dragons. And so a lot of people who aren't from Elmira don't know how to deal with them or don't know how to protect them. It's sort of like people who didn't grow up around bears versus like people who did.
Yeah. I think that also the fact that this book, there's like a dragon in every scene when they're in Elmira. And it might be in the background, it might be interacting with them, it might be dead on the ground. But because of that saturation, this is something we see in our world when people talk about the decline of a certain species. In the areas where that species does live, people will say, well, I see that thing all the time. Like I see manatees all the time. They're always around. Manatees are probably not the best example here, but they'll say like, oh, I see that species of bird or I see that mammal all the time. They're always around because that is a natural habitat of that animal. So they don't necessarily see the overall decline of the population and sometimes resist the reality that that population is declining. So that is something that we do actually see. And it's something that we see in this book where people are like, what? Dragons are everywhere. What are you talking about? But then where the dragons have been really eradicated, people are like, yeah, I haven't seen a dragon in years. Just interesting and a nice little detail that we have in this book. We move back to Bershad and Rowan. So again, Rowan is his Forsaken Shield. They meet the crew, which I already explained.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing worth explaining is that like we see Felgor in chains.
And Felgor is the thief.
Yeah, Felgor rocks. He's all vibes. He's a weird guy. I love him.
Yeah, Felgor is a great character. He's like just there to have a good time.
He's kind of the audience surrogate.
We cut back to Ashlyn and she has a conversation with her father about how to rule. And he's talking about you have to rule with violence, with the threat of violence. That's how you gain respect in this country. That's what people value. And she's like, well, I don't think I agree with that. And then she then walks to her tower where she starts researching dragons. So there's a scene earlier in the book where Bershad walks past a building when he is in the capital and the rock has melted on the building. And he's like, what the hell? Ashlyn takes this kind of weird cord off of her wrist. We learn that she found it when she was dissecting a ghost moth dragon, which is a species of dragon. It's kind of this translucent, fibrous cord, and that this is what melted that tower. So there's some kind of magic happening here, and she's trying to figure out what really is the root of it. And as she's thinking over this, a steward then comes to her and is like, "Hey, your dad's dead." So I feel like there are a lot of scenes in this book where Ashlyn's just told like, "Hey, this other person's dead. Hey, this other person's dead."
Yeah, I mean that's she's kind of getting boxed in.
Yeah, she is slowly getting boxed in. Yeah. Garrett then travels through the jungle as he's approaching Deepdale, and he stops by a river because his arm is really infected because the bone is starting to rot in his arm. And he is like, okay, I need to get this out. And that's when he sees Jolin, and Jolin is just also crossing. Very good luck on Garrett's part that Jolin just happens to be there.
I really liked Jolin to begin the book, and I thought it was really interesting to not focus on the dragon fighter in the beginning, like have a separate point of view character, and then he like vanishes. And I was like, why did you put him at the beginning of the book if we're not going to see him again? And then he shows up with Garrett, and I was like, oh, okay, this makes so much more sense.
Yeah. So Jolin talks to Garrett about the moss because Garrett's about to pack his wound with river moss. And he's like, don't do that. You're going to get a parasite. He doesn't say parasite, but that's basically what it is. And he talks to him about what kind of mosses he should use. So he talks about the 3 different kinds of mosses that are called warren mosses, and they're grown in dragon warrens. And 2 of them are more normal. They're more common in these warrens. And then there's the god moss, which is really, really valuable. It's really, really rare. And it's just a much more effective version of those other 2 mosses. He pulls out the tooth out of Garrett's arm and he treats it with the moss.
Jolin is walking around with like an entire apothecary on his back in the jungle, and when we have his point of view, he talks about how expensive all the stuff is, and he's like, well, I guess I'll put it on this guy's arm to save him. It's just kind of funny. Jolin's like a really put upon character, but like so good-hearted.
Yeah, he's
and it's
sweet.
just funny to watch him shack up with Garrett, who's like kind of evil. Like, he's not malicious, but he is evil.
Yeah. So they start traveling together. They build a raft to cross a river because they realize they have to ford this river. And Garrett is like, okay, let's go across. And then Jolin's like, no, we should build a mud totem first. And we already have learned that Jolin is kind of an atheist. He believes in science over superstition. And so Garrett's like, I thought you didn't believe in that. And he's like, well, I do believe in luck. So he builds this mud statue. And to explain these mud totems, the gods in Almira don't have names. And they're kind of interpreted as these humanoid, animal-like creatures. And it seems like every person is just building kind of their own vision of what a god might look like, the visage of a god. So they're usually these kind of hybrid forms of humans and animals. And they carry around a little bag of offerings that can have gemstones, they could have shiny rocks, they can have buttons. Sometimes they're feathers or pieces of an animal, a tooth or a bone, and they collect them and then they use them on these mud totems. So he builds one of these. I think he puts blueberries in its eyes or something, and then they cross the river. There's a dragon that goes underneath them while they're crossing, and if they had crossed the river earlier without building the mud totem, the dragon would have probably seen them. So he's like, aren't you glad I made that mud totem once they got across? And I think the point of that was that Garrett is, even though he doesn't want to be, he's kind of succumbing to the charm of Jolin.
The mud totems are just like a nice thing. They give a lot of character to the people, and it binds the people together who make them, so you can kind of see who the Almirans are. You sort of see that it gives them characteristics, and then it also is just like a thing for people to do in a scene, which is kind of nice. The only thing I would add is that Jolin is talking to Garrett the entire time.
Yeah.
Telling him his entire life story. It's very funny, and Garrett is like, oh god.
Yeah, it's very cute. Yeah. The other thing about the totems that I think is really sweet, I think in a lot of fantasy books, we'll have just kind of vague gestures of people making a religious gesture to invoke the gods, or they'll say like, they'll evoke the gods by naming them, or the book might say that they prayed, but it doesn't actually describe what that ritual looks like. And this is described, all of the worship of these gods is described so much through this ritual of making this mud totem. And it's just so unique and different, but feels much more real to what religion actually is, which religion is based in ritual. There's a reason why you cross yourself. You know, there's a reason why you do anything that you do in a religion that we take for granted a lot because it's just so normal to us.
Yeah, also it allows the author to show the different classes of the different people. Some people make totems out of bones and smaller things that they just can find, sticks and whatever. And then you see the elite making these giant statues out of gems or whatever that they're eventually just going to get washed away. So it's a way to illustrate different people in this world. It's really cool.
And also different protection. So they say that before a battle, all the mud totems have a scrap of metal in their hand. So what are you praying to the gods for? It's through the act of making this and decorating this sculpture instead of just them speaking it. Yeah, they were just really interesting.
If you think we're going on a lot about the mud totems, there is so much mud totems in this book. This is the exact right amount of mud totem discourse.
And look, I always love a sculpture made out of clay. I said it before, I'll say it again. And that's here in this book. So it was really working for me. So we go back to Ashlyn. Ashlyn doesn't make mud totems. She hosts a private funeral for her father, and then she goes to her dovecote to send messages. We learn that she's been selectively breeding these pigeons to be better and better carriers of messages, which I love. She receives a letter from the Empress of Papyra, which is her aunt, I think.
They're somewhat related. What I like about the doves also is they show like an alternate form of technology. This is a technology that is based in the environment and like isn't destructive, so it's kind of cool that she's like finding a new way to like move her nation forward. Like she's basically invented text messaging, but no one has to die for it, no dragons have to get murdered, no extractive process, nobody needs to be abused.
Yeah, and the book does make it very clear. So, one of the things that the book talks about in multiple places is that Elmira doesn't have very good roads, and that really disrupts a lot of trade, a lot of troop movement, migration of people, migration of goods because of these roads. And that part of that is not just because their infrastructure is bad, but because they don't have the resources to build good roads. They don't have really great stone quarries that they can use to build stone roads in the same way that Valeria does have that. But yeah, I just love a good pigeon communication system because I think a lot of books they think, well, pigeons aren't cool. I'm going to use ravens, or I'm going to use hawks, or I'm going to use this other animal that seems cooler to send messages. But if you're interested in pigeons as messengers, I would definitely look into it because there are about 60 animals who have received the highest Medal of Honor that an animal can receive throughout, the different wars that we fought, and 30 of them are pigeons because pigeons were such reliable and effective message carriers, especially in the world wars, that they were used and they could fly faster than telegraphs, which was amazing. So I love pigeons, and I love that they feature in this book. Yeah, anyway, so the Empress of Papyra sends her a message stating that she is willing to send aid and she's willing to give her what she needs. And we learn that she has been secretly fostering this relationship with this Empress when she found out that her father was really starting to decline. And the Empress is going to send her 75 ships and 300 widows for her protection. She also gets a second letter from Mudwall detailing that they need aid because of the violence there and because of that assassination of the Lord. So she has to send out a bunch of wardens her father actually did send out a bunch of wardens and she wanted to bring them back because she's trying to raise this army. And she realizes that she can't call them back. So she has to allow them to try to, bring order.
Basically, Mudwall is in the middle of a secession fight and she's trying to bring it to heel so she can bring it back into the fold of her empire. So then she can then assign a new ruler and stop all the squabbling. And then we get to part 2.
In part 2, Bershad's ship passes a group of sacred islands. So again, we have this religion where the Elmiran people believe that their gods came up from the sea. They sprouted this forest on this grouping of islands and created all of these creatures that are what is now on the mainland. And that when people die, their souls find this island. So it's a sacred island. They pass it. Yanmar makes a mud statue, and then Felgor's like, I fucking love these guys. I love these mud statues. They're so weird. And I was like, same, Felgor. I also love these mud statues. They reached port in Gallimar. It's a second country, and I don't know how to pronounce it. That's right outside of Valeria. Do you remember how to pronounce it?
I mean, it doesn't matter. We're just basically there to see some outsiders get brutally murdered and charged for crimes they probably didn't commit. This is when the castration happens, if you were listening to our trigger warnings.
Yeah, very graphic depiction of it as well. So just so you're aware. So what's happening is they need to get through this town to get into the rest of this country, and then they're using the border of this country to get into Valeria. But this town is executing these people called Skoyet. Am I pronouncing that right?
Skujit?
Gajit. Okay. They're these mountain tribal people that they're saying went below the line that they created between these two groups and murdered and harmed settlers in that area. And they're graphically murdering them one by one in this mass execution of all of these captured people while they're walking through the town.
It's a kind of a small scene in the grand scheme of things. We have these peasants who have very hard lives, and there's not a lot of farming or food around, and we just see the ruling class like using xenophobia and public executions to basically like pacify the public because their lives are difficult because of the ecological collapse caused by overhunting dragons. A grim vision of the future if they don't succeed.
Yeah. There also is a dead dragon that's been strung up in this hall in the town, and that they were able to kill. I think a dragon hunter was able to kill, and then he died. And Bershad's like, you should not have that dragon strung up here because that breed, that species mates for life, and that dragon's mate is going to come and kill you all if you don't get rid of it. And they're like, no, 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 we can do what we want. Just shut up. So they take him to the baron of the town who was taking part in this mass execution, and he says to them, Bershad and Rowan and your donkey can continue. You can go into the mountains because they have this fake rite of slaying that they're using to get through. But everyone else can. You cannot take the widow, you cannot take the lord, and you cannot take this other guy who I don't even know what the fuck he's doing here. No exceptions, and I will kill them if you try to take them. So they're escorted back to the ship, and just as they're about to all kind of have this little meeting to try to strategize what really to do next, the dragon that Bershad was worried about appears.
Bashad's dragon spidey sense goes off, which he's not even sure how he has a dragon spidey sense, but he's like, oh, it's coming. And he cuts off the back of the guard's head.
Nah, this is where he cuts off the top of the guard's head. He does the back of the head in a later scene.
They cut off a lot of heads.
Just like half or part of a head.
Yeah, so they can be sort of like moving around a little bit before it clicks in and then throws them in the river. And then the dragon shows up and they use it to like kill all the guards around them and sneak into the town.
Yeah. Bershad has the trope of dragon sense. I can sense when dragons are doing stuff, which is what Rohan has in Dragon Prince. That's another place that we see that. I don't know if we saw that anywhere else. I can't remember, but I remember that was in that book at least. Yeah, so they sneak through the town as all this chaos is happening. However, the townsfolk have all moved down to the river, which is something that they do after the mass executions end. And the Baron even talked to Bershad about this, where he's like, they do that to try to wash their sins away from taking part in this really violent activity, and they're trapped down by the river. So Bershad realizes they're about to get out of this city, and Bershad realizes that they're all going to die if he doesn't do something. So he then fights the dragon, and he is able to kill the dragon, though he does mention he gets the dragon to go up and dive onto his spear, but he does mention that she didn't even slow down. So she probably was just so full of rage from her mate being killed that she wasn't really thinking clearly.
Or she was just so sad she decides to kill herself. It's pretty tragic, both Rashad and for the reader.
So they make it through into the mountains, but they don't have any food because Yanmar dropped the food bag because he sucks.
Yeah, Yanmar is just, like, we don't talk about him a lot, but he's just every sniveling noble. Like, he's got shiny armor that he doesn't know how to use and a sword that he barely knows how to use.
Yeah, he wears a jaguar skin coat, which jaguars are sacred to the ancestral people of the Danewood, but the Greelers are more extractionist in their beliefs, so they have been killing them for trophies and have been like logging in this forest that had never been logged before. So, bad all around. We move back to Ashlyn. She calls a meeting of the lords, and she asks them to start raising armies and send half of each to the capital for her coronation. She is able to persuade most of them with tax breaks, and all but a warlord named Cedar Wallace, who is the most powerful of the High Lords, agree.
He certainly has the most men in his army, which means that he is both the biggest threat to her and also the most important person for her to get on her side for this upcoming war with Valeria.
Yeah, and it's his vassal who is currently laying siege to Mudwall. Lord Lincoln follows her after the meeting. He's one of the smaller lords. He's newer to his position and asks to speak to her privately. So they talk in her office. He tells her that he's willing to spy on the other lords if she gives him Mudwall. He also promises never to hunt any dragons and tells her that he knows her love of dragons, that he also has an interest in ecology.
He seems kind of slimy, but he doesn't come off as too bad to begin with, but she doesn't trust him, and you can tell he sucks from the beginning. I don't know.
You can also tell that she's not taken in by his charm. She's too smart for that, and she's trying to play the game as well. When he leaves, she tells Hayden, who is her widow, her bodyguard, the secret of the thread, and then she talks about how it only is activated when mixed with her blood specifically, and that she's tested all of these other humans' blood, all of these other animals' blood, all of these other combinations of blood and other ingredients, and it only works when she uses her own blood. And that when she uses her own blood, she can produce and control lightning. And then she practices with it. So she has to run her fingers down the thread, and the thread is rough enough that it seems like it's rough enough that it can cut her, but she cuts her hand and creates a pinprick.
It's barbed. I do have to say, this is one of my favorite scenes in the book, because Ashlyn is I crunched all the numbers, I did extensive research, I traveled everywhere, I read every book in the library, and all I can say is that magic is real and dragons have it. Anyway, here's my lightning powers. And it's yeah, girl.
Yeah, she's great. I love Ashlyn.
It's also just a fun way to introduce magic into this book. She's magic's real and dragons have it. I've done the research. You're okay, good to know.
Yeah. We cut back to Jolin and Garrett, and they reach the city of Deepdale. Garrett gets Jolin a bed at an inn, which he promised him. He said, I'll get you a feather bed and I'll allow you to eat as much as you can once we get there, because he realizes that a child helps him get into places easier because people trust children. They don't trust people who are traveling alone as easily, but he's saying it under the pretense that Jolin helped him. They eat and drink, and the next day, Jolin wakes up to Garrett in his room. Garrett tells him that his hand isn't able to close properly. He's feeling some numbness. And Jolin's well, it could be that sliver of the bone worked its way into your bloodstream and it's now rotting in a different area of and it causes a specific infection. So he's I need to leave here in the next hour. And he gives him money to go get the ingredients he needs from an apothecary so he can fix it.
It's just kind of a funny scene where Jolin is I'm so hungover, and then Garrett is watching him sleep and be hey, I need this fixed in an hour, and he's that's weird, but okay.
While he's walking, he hears that the Lord of Deepdale has been murdered, and he goes to see what it is, and the Lord of Deepdale is hanging from a statue, so he's been brutally murdered. He begins to suspect Garrett because he's this isn't adding up, but he still brings back the ingredients to make the medicine. Garrett is about to kill Jolin when 3 wardens come in to arrest Jolin.
Can I just take it a step back? I think this is a really interesting way that the author uses point of view. It switches because we have Garrett's perspective, and then it switches Jolin hungover and Garrett looking at him, and then we have Jolin walking through the area and we see the hanging guy, and we know that that's Garrett, but we don't get to see it, so you have this kind of confusion. And then Jolin goes to give Garrett the stuff. Garrett holds out money, and Jolin is you know what, I don't want to take the money, I just want to go live my life. And Garrett has a knife behind his back waiting for Jolin to take the money so he can kill him, and it switches right at that moment. So we see Jolin about to reject the money, and then it switches to Garrett being come on, just take the money so I can kill you, and then they burst in. It's just really well written.
Jolin sees that Garrett's one hand is next to the knife as his other hand is holding out the gold coins because he already suspects him.
Mm-hmm.
So he is I think that this is not going to end well for me. But I think I agree with you. The book is able to create a gap between the reader and Garrett's intentions through Jolin's perspective. So we often will get Jolin's perspective in a scene before we get Garrett's, as a way to build this tension where we, the reader, are like, I also am starting to suspect this thing. And then we get Garrett's perspective on the scene, which Garrett is still a very withholding point of view character. He doesn't give a ton to the reader, but after having the perspective of Jolin first, it fills in a lot of gaps that Garrett would not be willing to tell you, the reader.
It also switches from the active participant each time it does a perspective switch, which is I love, because a lot of times you get a perspective switch when the writer doesn't want to write the big scene. So someone's about to go into a fight and then they cut to someone else and they see them hear the fight in the background or whatever. But this one, you have Jolin who's moving through the town, seeing how the town is reacting after this murder, and then it cuts to Garrett right as a bunch of guards are about to burst in, and Garrett is the one who then fights and kills them, and that is the action of the scene. So it's really interesting to switch back and forth between them in a way that makes it more interesting.
Yeah. So just to give context for what that fight is about, the guards accuse Jolin of burning down the apothecary that he was working in and tell him that he's under arrest for this arson. And they go to arrest him, but then they question who Garrett is, and then Garrett decides that he needs to kill them. So he really brutally murders these people, but one's about to take him down, and Jolin throws his stone mortar that he uses to grind up herbs and hits him in the head, and then Garrett slits the guy's throat. And then Jolin says to him, you were gonna kill me, right? That's what you were going to do before the guards burst in. And Garrett says yes, and he says, okay, go ahead then. And then we cut back to Bershad. So it also creates tension through the way the author is cutting from one storyline to the next. Bershad and the others walk through the forest. Felgor is throwing up for some reason. There's so much vomit in this book. The donkey is vomiting in the boat.
I think it was because he was weak from being imprisoned, and this is his first time walking around in a long time. But yeah, people are sick a lot in this book.
They spend their first night below the line into the Skojit territory, and then they move into it. So the Skojit are apparently really, really dangerous, really warlike, really vicious. Vera is able to catch fish for everyone to eat, and they talk while eating. Yanmar explains to the others, or to Felgor specifically, how Bershad was exiled. So basically what happened was Bershad, when he was 18 years old, was sent on his first real military command to destroy this group of mercenaries in a place called Glenlock Canyon. So he was able to corner them in this canyon, and there was some interaction between him and Herzog where he was waiting for the command from Herzog to move forward. But by that point, the mercenaries were able to take hostages, and they strung them up along a line of trees. And for whatever reason, Bershad still continued with his charge and caused all these peasants, all these townsfolk, all these commoners to be killed, because they just killed all of them during this fight. And then Bershad succumbed to this bloodlust during the battle and really destroyed this force, but the leader of the force was able to escape. And then when he came back into the city, he was immediately exiled. He wasn't able to even get fully into the city before they declared him an exile.
Yeah, it's worth saying, as soon as they mentioned that the evil villain leader of the evil villain crew got away, I was like, we're going to see that guy later in this book.
Yeah.
But also, what's kind of funny is both Felgor and Vera are like, that's it? They're like, I think it's more of a king problem that he annoyed all of these mercenaries and got himself in a position that required him to go up against a rock in a hard place with a bunch of civilians there.
Yeah. Bershad is sad. He goes to sit with the donkey, and Vera then talks to them, and they then talk about each other and themselves. The next day, Felgor tells him why he was arrested, and it's because he was able to sneak into the Balerian palace, and somehow he escaped.
He talks about basically getting arrested in almost every place he has been and sneaking out and running out of places places he can hide, essentially. So that's why.
He almost functions under this I can't help myself kind of thing because he's constantly stealing things from people and finding things where he's like, ooh, that's mine now.
Yeah, he's such a good thief.
He talks later in the book how he's like, I just did it because I wanted to see if I could do it.
Yeah.
So he doesn't always have a strong reason for doing things. This is where we have this really like graphic pooping scene, which I've never read in a book before. But Bershai goes to take a poop, and we get this long description of the process of him pooping, and then he is shot in the leg with an arrow. The Skagit find them, they fight, and they are able to kill the Skagit. But Yanmar is also killed, and in his pouch they find a jewel and a note to go see someone named the vampire. So do you want to talk about the fight scene here?
Yeah, we get to see everyone's fighting style, which is very cool and different. This is when we get to really see the Willow fighting someone who's much bigger, and he's taken a bunch of hits and like is bleeding and is like dead on his feet essentially, but he's still got a time before he dies. Burchard takes the arrow to the leg and then is like shit, and like tries to figure out how to fight naked with this archer girl without any of his weapons. So Burchard's a much more physical, animalistic fighter. We see a little bit of Rowan's a competent fighter. We see that Felgor is not. But it really shows, I think, and I'm going to talk about it in this scene, even though it's throughout the whole book, because I don't want to go on about it. We really see in this scene the physicality of killing a person and like how much damage a human body can take before it's dead, or how much body it can take before it's lame. And it's really interesting to see that in this scene. You really get to see how a fighting between two averagely prepared people is just this war of attrition where you're just trying to give them a fatal wound before they give you a fatal wound, or give them a fatal wound before they have enough in them to like really lame you. And this book has such an understanding of bodies and what it is like to be dying without quite being dead yet, and it really infuses all the book, and it's a little bit gross, I'm not gonna lie to you. We aren't talking about it for a reason, but I just really think it really clarifies the stakes of this story, of the stakes of every fight, and gives this book like a physicality that I think is like, beautiful is not the right word. I really think it's the heart that sort of ties this book together, and it's just like so well done. I like a lot of times will comment on if this happened to a person, they'd be dead, like their back's broken, they're never gonna walk again, or if they got hit in the head this sort of way, like that's a concussion, they're gonna be slow or whatever, or throw up, like it might actually kill them. So it's just really nice to see a book that really takes the limits of the human body and physicality into account, but like doesn't skimp on the fighting. There's fight scenes basically every 20 minutes of this book, and it's really great. So that's me waxing poetically about the fight scenes. I think this fight in particular is such a good example, but throughout the book, it's just like, mwah.
Yeah, this book has an attention to detail in almost every aspect to it that is really satisfying in the fight scenes, but also in just when we first meet Garrett. I'm going on a huge tangent right now. When we first meet Garrett, it describes everything in his bag that he carried with him. And I don't know why that really stuck with me, but it really stuck with me. And every part of this book, it has this really specific attention to detail. And then the things that it does bring in, the details that it does bring in, are meaningful to the narrative, not just as texture in the background, which is really nice.
Even the focus on shitting in this book, which like this scene starts with a description of him shitting, and you're like, I don't know if I've ever read a book about someone taking a shit before. And I'm like, yeah, but that's like kind of like this book is about. It's like humans are messy and they do these things that are natural but gross, and it's a part of it. So even the shitting is justified, and there's so much shit in this book.
Yeah. There's more to come. The group then travels through the mountains. They try to ford a river, but only Rowan and Felgar are able to make it to the other side with Alfonso before... Alfonso's the name of the donkey. I don't think I mentioned that yet. Before the branch that they're using snaps. And the other side of the river, the reason that they're trying to ford it here, there's a really easy trail up the mountain, but Bershad and Vera are stuck on the other side, so they have a much harder trek. So they're like, we'll meet you up there. It might take a few days. Bershad and Vera, unfortunately, realize that they're being followed by more Skogit, and they are able to then attack camp at night and kill them. It's another very gritty fight that's described in a lot of detail. It's described in this very satisfying way of like how they plan to take each down, where you see the battle strategy of both sides, which is quite interesting, but it's not in a way that feels like it lags at all.
And also, the terrain really affects the fighting here. Vera is incredible with a slingshot. It's basically a gun. She can shoot people down, but she needs space to move and to reload. So even though she can basically insta-kill people, she can only do it a couple of times, and then she has to rely on other things as they close difference. And you really see the limitations of their different fighting styles, but also how specific and good they are. It's a great scene.
Yeah, and she misses sometimes with her shots, which I feel like you never see with a distance fighter, like with an archer or someone who has a sling. They're always like 100% accuracy in these books, and it describes her missing sometimes or her grazing someone instead of actually lethally killing them. And I think that's really nice and it brings realism into the book. But when she does hit them, it explodes their heads. Their heads like literally explode.
They talk about brain matter quite a lot.
Yeah.
Or they talk about a pink mist that comes out of their head, which is really gross but cool.
Yeah. So he does have to help her take down the final person when everyone is dead except for the two of them. Her fingers are all dislocated and one is really broken.
Yeah, basically the Skidget was able to close distance on her, and even though she had a killing blow to him, he was still basically trying to fuck her up on the way out, and it dislocates all of her fingers in one hand except for her pinky, which is just fucked.
Yeah.
That's the nicest way to describe it.
Yeah, we're not going to describe it in detail because hand injuries really gross me out. We move back to Ashland. She welcomes the wardens into the city, or some wardens. She thinks about how Cedar Wallace hasn't sent any yet, and that news from Mudwall has stopped arriving, so she has no idea what's happening in a large portion of her kingdom. Then the fleet of Papyrian widows arrives in 72 ships, so they lost 3. But, all 300 widows are there. They come off the ship, and she uses them in this intimidation display to the lords. She does allow Lincoln to accompany to her dock, and he suggests that she is planning to invade Valeria during the Great Migration so that she can study dragons. And she really shuts him down quickly. She's like, "Are you insane? My sister's been kidnapped. Why would I start a war just so I can study dragons?" And he is a little bit cowed by that, but it just shows that there are cracks already in this relationship and that he's underestimating her. She is then informed that Greeler is dead, who is that Lord of Deepdale in the Danewood, and then makes the decision that she has to send 3,000 wardens to clean up the mess that has then happened because of that. Because the city is basically in a civil war right now with the old followers of Bershad's family and the new followers of the Greelers.
Basically, the two sons of the guy who takes over the city split into and both claim heritage, and then they blame it on Burchard's former crew, and Burchard's former crew is like, "Fuck it, we out," and then like disappears into the Danewoods.
Aren't they causing trouble in the Danewood, though?
I have to be honest, I definitely listened to this part on a bus.
There's just chaos in Deepdale now, and she has to send wardens to clean it up, and it's thinning her numbers of her known allies even more.
Yeah, she's doing math where she's like, all right, these people are loyal to me. These people are loyal to the people who pretend to be loyal to me. How do I make the numbers work that I'm not outnumbered in my own home and thus susceptible to being usurped?
Yeah. So she knows that she is in a really precarious position right now. We cut back to Bershad and Vera. He sets 3 of her fingers, but he does have to cut off her pinky. So this is the first loss of limb of many in this book.
I'm going to keep this to just this sentence, which is just like, we talk a lot about the depiction of women, and I don't think we're going to talk about it too much here because it's just like so chill. The women are confident and they're respected by some people and not respected by annoying people, but for the most part, women are just allowed to be other characters. The women are highly trained unless they're good at this, and then like Ashland's like very smart, and I just really like how it doesn't kind of try to make them into like girl bosses. It just makes them into characters that have their own set of skills skills and their own intricacies, and being a woman is part of that, but it's not an all-consuming identity to them.
Yeah.
And it's really cool that Vera is just like this tough warrior who gets to be a tough warrior, and she's like, yeah, fuck it, cut off my pinky, I don't give a shit.
Well, she is pragmatist. She knows. She's like, yeah, you are going to have to cut that thing off. Let's do it. I'll be okay. I'll be better if it's cut off. She then asks him why he didn't use moss on his arrow wound, because she is noticing that he's able to move much better than he should be able to with a wound in his thigh that he received just days earlier. And he refuses to tell her. She then forces him to use it. And she's like, I'm going to check on that in a day, and we're going to see what that looks like. They then stop near a dragon warren. They're not in the warren yet, but they start to notice that the world around them is becoming more vibrant. The trees, which they're going up a mountain, they're going up in altitude. And if you're ever on the top of like a really tall mountain, you'll notice that the trees all get smaller and they get more sparse because the oxygen levels are just so much lower that trees can't be as large. But they're noticing that the opposite is happening, that they had been noticing, and that the trees are becoming larger. The air is warmer, the air is more humid, the world is just lusher. And they get to a stream, and the water is warm, and so warm that it's steaming. And it's implied that the warren is causing this, or I think it's even just said that the warren is causing this.
Yeah, basically dragons are magic, like we said before, and the places that they live and build also are magic.
Yeah. They bathe in the stream and then they have sex.
Yeah, she's kind of like, I think you're hot and you're competent and good at a fight. We might die here. You want a bone? And he's like, yeah, sounds agreeable.
Yeah, they have sex. It's fine. I think it was very obvious that it was written by a man, but and I don't feel that way about the first sex scene in this book.
I thought it was pretty boilerplate, but I also think a lot of this book is kind of boilerplate. You have the queen and the dragon hunter. He's like maybe an animal. A lot of the plotting is something that is not necessarily new, but it's just done in such a competent way that I don't mind it. And I also feel that way a little bit about the sex scene, where it's like, yeah, there's a sex scene here, but I think it's interesting.
There's just such high detail given to the specific shape of her breasts and her nipples that it's like, okay, we get it.
Okay, she has tiny boobs.
She has the smallest areolas he's ever seen, guys. Jolin and Garrett then make camp after fleeing Deepdale, so he didn't kill Jolin. Jolin then asks why he didn't kill him, and Garrett says, because I think you could still be useful. And Jolin's like, okay, if I like set up an apothecary in some random place in this country, how would you even find me? And Garrett's like, well, and then they have this kind of weird debate over morals for a minute, which is interesting. Jolin then leaves and Garrett makes for Floodhaven.
This book, for all that it likes to say about how like people are about conflict and people are jealous and blah blah blah, a lot of the characters we do see on screen actually like form quite beautiful and lovely friendships, and I think it's like a interesting tension in the book where it could be more grimdark because everyone's out for themselves, but both Jolin and Garrett are like, man, I keep helping this person even though I don't need to do that. And you could expect Brashad and Vera to like have some sort of weird relationship, but really they just are like, hey, I like you. Like, you're a competent fighter, I'm a competent fighter. You don't seem like an idiot or a moron or an evil person. So like, let's bond together.
Yeah.
We don't talk about this, but Felgor and Rowan are actually also bonding at this point earlier in the book. And Felgor keeps talking to Rowan. You really like me, and I like you. And Rowan is like, no, I don't. But you can totally tell that Rowan thinks Felgor is like a fun hang.
Yeah, Rowan then does tell Bershad in a scene that's close to where we are at that Felgor really reminds him of one of his sons, because he has sons that he is not able to communicate with anymore because of his fealty to Bershad. But Rowan also does this really funny thing with Felgor, and it happens multiple times in the book, where Felgor will be telling this story that everyone else is like trying to ignore because it's either graphically sexual or it's just kind of in poor taste or something, and he's like trying to get a rise out of people. He's trying to get them to laugh or to ask him more about. He's like, ask me more, ask me more, ask me to give you some details. And then Rowan will just be like, so and he'll just change the subject without acknowledging Felgor, and it's so funny. I love that. It's just such a cute way of like showing this relationship.
Yeah, there's a lot of real good scenes of people quietly hanging out on their way to do battle. Speaking of which, we didn't say it was part 3.
It's part 3, baby. We have a scene where Ashlyn holds court to show how politically minded she is. She is able to corner this person into doing what she wants him to do, but she's also just like exhausted. She's like, my mouth is dry. This chair is uncomfortable. There's a fly in this room. She's like, I want to go practice with my thread more, but I can't. Then we cut back to Bershad and Vera, and they decide that their fling was a fling, that it was just a way to relieve tension. They then are able to meet up with Rowan and Felgar, and this is when we really see that Rowan and Felgar have this really cute relationship. And then they enter the Dragon Warren. And they're entering the Dragon Warren because it's a way that they can tunnel through the mountain and get to the other side. And currently it is empty because the dragons migrate to these warrens. This is where they congregate. They're not congregating there at this moment, so there are all of these really juicy vines. It's becoming jungle-like. It's described as really, really humid in this space. There's moss everywhere. And Bershad starts to have this really weird reaction where it's like his hearing is extremely amplified. He can hear every heartbeat of every animal around them, including like mice. He knows that where every insect is, and he can feel like the life of the plants and everything. And it's really overwhelming to him. And it comes upon him and then it goes away. Then it comes upon him again. And it's so intense that he passes out.
So this is a scene that isn't explained, but it seems like either I wasn't sure if it was the Warren itself or like they talk about him like slicing through these vines that spurt these purple liquid everywhere, but he can like kind of hear people's heartbeats and he thinks he's gonna die, and it's only because Rose shoves the moss in his mouth that he's able to like make it through. It's a scene that's not explained, but it's a trilogy, so I'm sure we'll figure out later.
Yeah. He wakes up and Rowan tells him that he found some god's moss in the Warren and used it on him, and he has the rest in a vial. He hands it to Bershad, and Bershad hides it in his hair. So I didn't explain this in the previous scene, but Vera is able to see this, where she forced him to use that moss, and it wasn't the god's moss, it was a different Dragon Warren moss on his leg, and his leg is now completely healed. So he already heals faster than normal people without the aid of moss. But when he uses any moss, any of the 3 Warren mosses, like even the 2 more common ones, he heals really, really rapidly. Not instantaneously, but instead of weeks, it takes days or hours even. And when he uses the God's Moss, it's like a video game, like you take a 100% healing elixir. He heals almost instantaneously with the God's Moss.
And maybe get super strength.
Yeah, and maybe get super strength.
The thing about the healing thing is that he doesn't know, but he's been trying to hide it from people.
Yeah.
We see him hiding it with Jolene in the first chapter of the book, and then he tries again with Vera, but she like wrestles it out of him. And she's kind of the first person to be like, to basically give that with great power comes great responsibility spiel to him. But she's like, this is important and good. You should use it. You should be aware of it and like use it for good. And he's like,
yeah. And part of why he wants to hide it from people is people believe in demons in Elmira, and he's afraid that if they know that he has this ability, that he has a demon inside of him and they might try to do whatever to him. So he's a little nervous about that. And he also just is allowing the legend of the flawless Bershad to be the reason and the answer. And like people can believe what they want. And if they believe that it's just exaggerated, then that's what they believe, instead of trying to give, oh yeah, this is actually something that's happening that's really weird and unexplainable. Anyway, Bershad hides the God's Moss in his hair. They find an old boat and are able to use it to descend the mountain and get to the city of Tagerstan, which is a giant floating barge city. So we have the giant floating barge city trope. We get some colorful description of the city. Again, the attention to detail in this book is quite lovely. They pass through multiple places in search for the vampire. So we learn that the city is run by different gangs, and the vampire is in charge of one of these gangs. And Bershad realizes that the vampire is a man named Velen Vergun, who was the leader of the mercenary group that he tried to annihilate and was not able to kill.
The foreshadowing from earlier shows up way sooner than I thought.
Yeah, so he starts a bar fight with a guy to get Velen's attention. Then we cut to Ashlyn. So Ashlyn is preparing for the worst during her coronation. She's about to do her coronation, and she's like, something's gonna happen. I just know it. I just don't know what it's gonna be. And she speaks of war during her address. She's wearing this dragon mask. Everyone's wearing a mask because masks to your clan is a cultural thing. And she decides to wear a dragon mask. So she's speaking of war and the importance of war in her address. dress. She asks each High Lord to back her, and each one agrees until she gets to Cedar Wallace. And he's like, attack!
He's like, I'll never pledge to you. And then like all of his people have big ass cloaks and they just like throw them off and they've all got like weapons ready.
Weapons and shields. Yeah, they have shields so that they can protect themselves against the slings. They also realize that the archers that she placed on the wall were replaced by his men as well, and it's basically a bloodbath. She is able to escape, and she's found by two men. She kills them with lightning because she's like, okay, I got to do it. It's do or die now. She is able to kill them with lightning. The widows then find her, and they secure the castle, but Cedar Wallace is able to escape.
Yeah, this fight scene fucks. It's great.
A lot of heads explode.
Yeah, and they've whittled down the shields so they're not as effective so the widows can get through, but it's just a great fight scene.
Yeah, and the only reason the widows don't just destroy them all immediately is because the archers are behind the widows and are able to then shoot the widows and push them off the ramparts. Bershad goes to deal with Velen Vergun alone. He is taken to him. He learns that this was a setup by Yanmar, and they need this man to give them these seals so that they can get into Baleria and through the Balerian city. And the seals are these plates that have been stamped with this complex system of dots that they run through a machine, and then the machine says whether or not they have access or grants them access or doesn't to certain areas within the city. And then on the other side of the seal, it has the physical description of the person who owns it. So they need these seals, and he's the only one who can give them realistic enough forgeries that they will be able to get into the city. He learns that Yanmar was able to negotiate delivering Bershad to him in order to get these seals.
The seals are only for Yanmar, Felgor, and Vera.
Yeah, not for Rowan, not for the donkey, and not for Bershad. Yeah, so Vergun says, look, I will duel you in a chalk circle because I want everyone to know that I killed you. And if you live, I'll let you go. And if you die, I'll still give them, he's still willing to give them passage.
He captures everyone off camera, by the way, because Rashad is like, go, be free, I'll fight this guy. And then they show up later and it's like, dude, this is a big trap. And everyone's like captured, including the donkey. And they're like, oops.
Yeah, but he's like, look, whether you live or die, I will give them free passage. I just want to take you out.
Yeah, good guy, Vergun.
And use your skin as a pavilion.
We kind of skimmed on this, but Vergun is in a tent made of people's skin.
Yeah, this is where the impaling is also. So they duel, and Vergun is known widely as one of the best swordsmen in the country. And he really fucks up Bershad because Bershad hasn't really used a sword in 14 years. And we see his fighting style throughout the book, and it's very animalistic. It's more like he uses terrain and luck and openings, but in a chalk circle, you don't have the advantage of terrain and ambush. And Vergun basically breaks every bone in his body, just strategically. And then he's like trying to get him to beg, and Bershad's like, no, I don't care, you can kill me. And then he calls up Alfonso, the donkey. He kills Alfonso with Bershad's dragon-tooth blade.
Bershad won't beg for himself, and he's like trying to reach the god's mass in his hair, but it's too far because his arms are like super, super broken.
His arms and wrists and hands.
Yeah.
Like every bone on the way down is broken, basically.
They break all of his arms and legs, and he's like, beg for your life. And he's like, I'm not gonna beg for my life. Oh my god, I don't even like my life. You should just kill me. And then they're like, bring in the donkey. And he's like, oh, actually, no, don't kill my donkey. I'm so sorry. Please. You're the biggest, strongest guy. Don't kill him. And then they kill the donkey anyway. He's like, god damn it.
Yeah, and then he's like, I'm gonna kill you anyway, even though you begged. And then Rowan's like, hey, according to custom, I can take his place. So let me take his place. You can kill me instead of Bershad, and then just let them go. And Vergun realizes that this is going to mess up Bershad more than if he just kills Bershad. So he does kill Rowan. There's this really sad scene where Rowan says goodbye to him. He takes the seashell that Bershad has had around his neck and puts it in his mouth before he gets killed. And then they are given passage. So he's a man of his word.
Bershad's so fucked up. He's like, clearly you're gonna live your life as a miserable cripple thinking about everything you've done. So that works for me too. Or you're gonna die from infection in a couple of weeks. So this works out great for me.
He lets Vera and Felgor go.
Yeah, he sends him on a barge. So one thing worth saying is that Vergun doesn't actually kill Rowan. His lackey does it, and his lackey and a second lackey take Vera and the mess of smushy mushy flesh that is Brashard, and I just have to imagine it's a bunch of like soft, crunchy, like his. I'm not going to talk about his collarbone sticking out.
No, it's nasty the way they describe that. Ugh.
Yeah, and so the whole crew like gets on the boat, and then it immediately cuts to Vera's perspective, which was delightful.
This is the first time we're in her perspective as well.
Really nice because first off, Brashard just, it seems like it would be really miserable to be in his head.
Yeah, it would be so annoying.
Just drinking wine and like oozing pus and throwing up and shitting and genuinely smelling like a trash heap. And also, it's kind of nice because 4 sentences into her POV, we get a thought about her worrying about Kira and thinking about Kira. So it's like kind of nice to be like, oh yeah, this is what this character is all about.
Yeah, she's also dealing with some sexual harassment from the 2 freaks, and she's just like, ugh, these guys are so gross. And it's more like they think they have game, but they don't.
She's not even worried about it. She's like, ugh, men are talking to me. This is the worst. I'm not gonna fuck both of you, obviously.
Yeah. She finds a bunch of moss so this is also a smuggler ship, and they're smuggling opium into the capital city, and they're using the smell of the moss to mask the smell of the opium so that sniffer dogs don't find it. So she takes a bunch of the moss, she takes it to Bershad, she kind of yells at him for a minute. She's like, you need to pull it together, man. And she then covers him with the moss, and he's like, no, don't, I want to die. And she's like, no. And she covers his body with it, and he's too broken, like his body is too broken for him to take it off. And when she checks on him again, he's healing really well. And he's like, you should have let me die. And she's like, you know what? Shut up.
I love that anytime this book gets a little mopey, it changes to someone who's like, come on, we got work to do. Move on. It's kind of nice. I mean, there's the emotional depth there. We've talked in other books about how it can be kind of weird when the characters aren't reacting to the emotional weight of the scene. And then it can also be kind of annoying when they're spending a lot of time moping. So I think this is like a really good balance of, yes, this is a tragic hero who's going through it, but also he's standing tall and moving forward. I really like this book. I think they tell these stories very well.
Yeah, I agree. He then does tell her what really happened in Glenlock Canyon. So what actually happened, he was waiting for the king to give him orders because he saw that all these hostages were getting taken and he didn't know what to do. So he's waiting for the king to give him a command. And the message he received from the king was like, hey, your dad has been arrested for treason because his dad was actually having an affair with his wife.
With the queen.
And he's like, I will let your dad live if you kill every single one of them, which was why he did what he did, because he didn't want his dad to die. And he even says to her, he is like, my dad wouldn't have even wanted me to do that. He wouldn't have wanted all those people to die, but his dad is killed anyway. And he wasn't able to kill all of them because the leader escaped. So he really failed on 2 accounts.
3 if you count all the peasants that got murdered.
Oh, those were the 2 things that I was counting. I didn't even count the fact that the guy escaped. You're right.
I thought it was an appropriately tragic backstory. I liked that they sort of foreshadowed it. When you wait for something for this long, especially for a character that's a hero, I was a little bit worried it would be something that would be like, no, dude, that's stupid. You didn't have any choice. But it's like, no, he really did sell out 100 people for his dad to live. He wouldn't even wanted it, and it didn't even work. So it kind of makes sense why he's like, this whole thing fucking sucks, you know, and why he's held on to it for so long. I thought it was a really interesting and well-written backstory, and I liked how it was paced out to build tension. And I also liked that they didn't sit on it any longer than it needed to be. Like, I didn't want it to come out in the climax or anything. I thought now was a really good part for it. And it also bonds him to Vera, and we see them get closer in this platonic way as like 2 warriors. And I just really like their relationship.
This is the first person he's told in 14 years. Rowan knows about it because he was there, but no one else knows about it. Vera is literally the first person he told the truth to. But it's also like doing that to save his dad is kind of a move that an 18-year-old with an army behind him would do. So it's realistic also. I could see an 18-year-old making that decision.
I would also say that he, at this point, has just lost his 2 companions who have been with him for the past 14 years, but we're also seeing in Falgor and Vera new companions move into his life. So we see that he has a new support system that's growing. Felgor talks about how much he misses Rowan and how sad he's about the death.
Yeah.
And it's just really beautiful to see all 3 of their relationships growing together throughout the battles and the bloodshed.
Yeah, really nice. We cut back to Ashlyn. She learns that her pigeons are getting shot down, and that's why she isn't seeing any of them. She goes up to the gates and she's watching a sentinel sentinel return that she sent out to get information. They stop in this tree line before coming to the castle, and she's like, what's going on there? And the city guard, the person who's guarding the walls, is like, that's not normal. That's not something that usually occurs. And she's like, shut it down right now. Those aren't our guards. They're just wearing our guards' clothes. And as they shut down, as they secure everything, close all the gates, everything, Cedar Wallace orders all of his men to light bonfires, and it illuminates the forest. And they see that all of the wardens that she had sent out and that her father had sent out previously, which is thousands of people, have been killed and hung from the trees. So they're just all hanging there. We see that he has, I think she says he has 10,000 troops. He sends a message on a dead warden, so he sends it, the guy's on a horse, saying that he's going to begin the siege at dawn, and she has the choice of surrendering now,
living in exile, or being deposed and
brutally murdered,
and sexually assaulted.
Yeah. Bershad and company approach the capital city, and it's very steampunk. It's a giant kind of clock city. We could say there's this huge gear that turns and ticks and powers everything else in the city, including all the gates. And they talk about the smell of the city. It smells like dragon oil, which has a pine smell. So the city doesn't smell like nasty. It actually smells really clean.
Yeah, both of them are really shocked about it. This is a level of technology they've never experienced. Like at one point, there's artificial lights and they've never seen that. They're like, wow, so they can stay up during the night and keep working. So it's so Country Bumpkin goes to the city a little bit, but it really just shows you how completely different the cultures are.
Yeah.
The technical advances are there.
Yeah. They plan how to kill the henchmen when they arrive. When they get there, Bershad wanders off the ship pretending to be feeble, and they're like, hey, get back on the boat. And then they have a really gritty fight, but they do kill everybody. And Felgor helps, and he's a little bit shaken by the process. They hide the bodies while Felgor goes out to get information. When he comes back, he tells them that he finds a poster that says that Kira is planning to be married to is it the next day, or is it like in a few days?
I think it's like tomorrow she's getting married. Also, while Felgor is out, Vera kind of like takes Bershad aside, and I'm like, look, I know you're sad about your friend and you got to kill the guy who killed him, so that's great. But that was not the plan, and if you want this to work, I need you to follow the plan, so you gotta lock in. Basically, she's like, you can't go with ego, you gotta lock in, and he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. He also does a thing where he sends the heads back with the captain of the boat, and he's like, tell Velen I'm coming for him.
Basically, I'll see you in book 2 or 3 for a rematch.
Yeah. Felgor also brings Bershad some foundation to hide his tattoos because they're in a theater district, and he was able to steal it from one of the actors. And he's also able to steal clothes for them so that they can blend in. They only need to get through one checkpoint before they can get to his secret way into the castle, and they sneak through the city. Do you want to talk about this scene?
Yeah, I think it's really cool because you see Felgor snatching different cloaks. Bershad is like, this is really gaudy. And he's like, no, but you have to be a noble to play it up. Well, you also see them watch a play of Bershad, and he's like kind of embarrassed about it. It's him killing one of his dragons because this is a society that hates dragons, who he's like very revered because he's the dragon slayer.
I don't think they hate dragons. In this scene, a dragon flies overhead and everyone looks up, and Bershad thinks that they're all looking at him for a moment and that they've recognized him because he describes this sound of awe, and then he realizes that they're all looking up at the dragon. And this is something that they almost never see. So Felgor describes to them that before they see the Red Skull in the town that gets attacked by the Red Skull, he's never seen a dragon before because he grew up in this city and dragons are so rare now.
I just thought the scene was really cool in the city. And I mentioned this before. Felgor describes a very frozen class system, but he also describes how no one goes hungry in this. So all this technology locks people in place, which he is personally against, and that's his whole reason d'etre as a thief, is to prove to people that these rules are just built on sand and you can move about and choose your own destiny, which is kind of cool. But also that there are some benefits to the technology and why people would choose this capitalist side, because it does have a higher quality of life, even if it isn't sustainable, even if it is inflexible. I just like the level of complexity in this theme of nature versus progress, capitalism versus environmentalism.
Yeah, it's a more nuanced look than you see in a lot of books about that subject, or a lot of fantasy about that subject.
It's not super deep because this is a book about cutting people's head offs and dragons, but on top of being a really good book about people stabbing each other and fighting dragons, there's a complex and interesting world that you can engage with.
Yeah. They are able to get through the checkpoint, even though Bershad's seal doesn't describe him physically. And they do that because Felgor throws up on a guard as he's looking at Bershad's seal, which is, again, throw up is plot important in this book. They then sneak into this area where there are all these manors, and he finds a opening to a sewer, and they walk through the sewer to get up to a shithole in the palace. And then they have to climb up the shithole. So they're completely covered in poo, and they get into the building and they hide in a linen closet.
Yeah, Felgor shows Rashad running water for the first time, and they're all very impressed. It is very funny that this shithole is specifically for someone who is large and had very bad bowels because he was such a rich noble, and that's how they're able to sneak in. Just like the excesses of it. It's funny and gross. It's pretty gross.
Yeah, it's gross, but it's self-aware, you know. They do have to kill a few guards to get to the area of the castle that Kira is in. So this is where they slice the back of someone's head off. Felgor then unlocks the room. Vera and Bershad both are like, you can go, you've done your thing, you're free, your end of the bargain is over.
Yeah, I mean, it's really touching. They lived up to their part of the bargain, which is Felgor was there to sneak them into the castle, and he's finally snuck them into the castle. And they're also like, this is a fool's errand, and you're not a big fighter, so you should just go. And it's also, hey, we have grown to love and care about you. We want you to survive. You should leave. And Felgor's like, but I love and care about you too, and I want to help. But they actually do convince him to leave. He doesn't say that because they're a bit more stoic than that. But like, it's a really touching moment.
Yeah, it's sweet. They then go to wake Kira, and she wakes up and she's like, but I want to marry Ganon. I ran away. I didn't get kidnapped.
Yeah, she's naked in the scene, and you're really supposed to get that she's a sexual manipulator. I have to be honest, did you call this? Because I called this.
Yeah, I just didn't really think it made sense that she would have been able to get kidnapped with Vera. I was like, how bad of a bodyguard would Vera had to be if she was able to get kidnapped, if this is what she was trained for 18 years to do? Because the widows are trained for 18 years. And I was like, it had to have been that Kira was able to slip her guard and leave on her own terms.
Yeah, I was really like, she's gonna Helen of Troy at Trojan War style, and it was right.
Yeah.
Vera, who has lost a finger for this quest, is like, I killed so many people to get here, and you just left. You couldn't have just said anything. And Kira's like, you would have talked me out of it. And she's like, well, yes, but then I would have gone with you.
Yeah.
And then Kira's, you know what? I actually did miss you. It's really funny. They're kind of like sisters. It's like a weirdly sweet moment between someone who has killed a lot of people and someone who has thrown her country into turmoil so she can marry a prince of a different country so she can personally have a better life because she is enamored by the technology and she thinks of Almara as a backwards countries. It's just a weird dynamic.
She also talks about freedom. She's like, I was tired of being told what to do my whole life, and now I will be in control of that. But yeah, so Vera decides to stay with her. She's like, okay, well, I'll stay here with you if that's what you want to do. Bershad starts to leave. He's like, okay, I have another thing to do. And she pulls the bell pull in her room, and the room then fills with guards. And she's like, don't touch my widow. She's my widow. But Bershad is taken to the emperor and his engineer, whose name is Osiris. He's in a chair. His arms are chained to the floor. And the emperor is standing there. And Osiris is like gleefully so creepy. He's like, hello. La la la, I'm super weird. I would love to have a talk with you after the emperor does. And then he's like, I'm gonna leave. See you later. And he leaves through a secret passageway in a bookcase. And as you're reading this, you're like, this doesn't seem like it fits in this book. And then after the bookcase closes, the emperor looks at Bershad and is like, I know that was just really weird, but keeping him happy has made my reign so much easier and better. So I have to just do the weird shit that he wants me to do and make for him. And that's why that bookshelf exists, which was really funny. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, he's like, I have to keep that guy happy. So I've been thinking about Brashad for a while as Wolverine, as like basically a comic book hero.
He is kind of like Wolverine.
I mean, he just doesn't have the claws, but he does have the super healing, and sometimes he has the super strength.
And the grumpiness.
Yeah, but Osiris is like such like a Superman villain. He's just like, ha ha ha. Evil experiments, necromancer kind of vibe, and I dig it.
So the Emperor talks to Bershad for a long time about his plan.
I also agree. I was like, ugh, the Emperor's monologuing. What a dumb supervillain thing. He goes on for a while because he has two misconceptions about Bashard. First, he thinks he's just been ordered to rescue Kira. And then the second one is that also that he would be happy with all of the dragons being dead so he could stop risking his life hunting them. So he basically propositions him like, with Kira not wanting to leave, would you like to sail back against Ashlyn who banished you? We'll kill all the dragons so you won't have to worry about that. And then you can lead an army to take Almyra for Kira since she has a claim to the throne and now she's married into my family.
He also says, he mentions Garrett. He's like, Garrett the Hangman's going to take care of Ashlyn, so she's going to be dead. And everyone loves you because they love the flawless Bershad. So after her wedding to Ganon, they're going to go back across the sea, and then she has a legitimate claim to the throne in Almyra. And you're going to escort her back, and everyone's going to love that.
I forgot this is when we get confirmation what's going on with Garrett, because this book doesn't have too many twists and turns in it. I could tell who hired Garrett for what reason from the beginning, but it's interesting that he's like, Garrett's connected to this in like a larger plot against Ashlyn.
I didn't realize that Garrett was connected to the Emperor of Valeria until this point. I was like, oh, interesting that he knows that.
Yeah, it sort of means that the conspiracy against Ashlyn is bigger than she realized, which is part of the reason she failed. But anyway, Brashard is like, you should be more worried about death. And he was like, why should I be more worried about death? And then he's like, because I've been sent here to kill you, and actually I like dragons, motherfuckers. And then the Emperor is like, ah, fuck. So he gets the god's mask out of his hair after like failing to do it like 3 times. It must have been like really in there. And then he like rips off his shackles Superman style, and then he kills the Emperor in like a really cool way. They describe the Emperor being lifted up and impaled on his sword, hanging limply. I imagined it in silhouette. It is really cool. And then he basically kills the next 8 guards with his fists because he's so strong from the super moss. And he's just like, oh, I did it. And then he does the stupidest thing in the entire book, but I get it.
I do just want to mention something. Before he does kill the Emperor, he confirms with the Emperor. He's like, so this, your idea to kill the dragons, that's your idea? And the Emperor's like, yeah, fucking Ganon, he doesn't think this is a good idea. I think it's, he has no vision, and my father had no vision. So Bershad basically confirms, okay, if I kill this guy, the dragons won't die. It's not going to be taken up by another person before he kills him, which is really good looking out, Bershad. But then he does make a bad decision. So he's like, I need to answer about why the moss does this to me. And I know that Osiris has them. So he opens the bookcase laboratory door, and he goes down, and he goes down all these steps. He passes by all the ballistas because they're being stored down there. And he's like, oh my God, there are a lot of them. And he confronts Osiris, and Osiris is like, hee hee hee, you came? So you did kill the Emperor? I don't care about that. I have my own research. And Bershad's like, you're gonna tell me. And he's like, well, I know something that you don't know. And then he shoots him with a tranquilizer that he made from dragon ingredients. As he's falling unconscious, he cuts off his foot,
which he helped grows back. I mean, he's helping. It's for science.
He cuts off Bershad's foot.
Yeah, it's really gross.
When Bershad wakes up, he's chained to a table and he has a new foot. It's grown back. And Osiris is like, I put the god's moss in your foot stump and it grew back. And look how beautiful this foot is. It doesn't have any scars on it like your old one did. It looks great. He talks to him. He's like, you'll soon bloom and become something new, but your current self will be dead. And Bershad is like, am I turning into a dragon?
Yeah, unclear.
Unclear. Osiris does not answer that question. He's like, perhaps. He. And you're like, wait, that's a yes or no question. Because that's a ridiculous question to just ask. He then cuts off Bershad's entire leg on his other leg. like not the foot that he cut off previously, but the other side. And he's like, let's see how far this goes. And he then slits his throat and stuffs them both with moss, but he also passes out again. One of the things that Osiris mentions, he's like, the effects of healing are going to last for a while after you're healed. So he can like cut the foot open again that he just grew, and it will heal really fast because the lingering effects of the god's moss are still there. But when he cuts him on a different part of his body that wasn't just healed with the god's moss, he doesn't heal as fast.
Yeah, he goes basically if he regrows a limb, it's a full Wolverine limb. So I had thought that the healing was somehow tied to he gets like a tooth in his gut pretty bad early in his dragon fighting, and he's pretty sure he's gonna die, but then he heals from it. And I thought that might have been where the healing comes from, but it seems like it's more of a from birth thing, or maybe tied to his exploring of dragon warrens as a kid.
I also thought that it was from what you just said, but Osiris is like, let me guess, you explored dragon warrens a lot from a kid. Your kind are often drawn to them. And he calls him a seed, and he says that he's seen others like him. But the reason I thought that it was because of the dragon tooth is because we had that whole long thing with Garrett having the tooth in his body, and the sliver of the tooth got into his bloodstream and was affecting him in a different way. And I just was like, yeah, so the thing happened with Bershad too, but it's affecting him just in a different way.
And they talk about how everything usually goes to rot, but this one didn't. I think it's like fine. There's just a lot of things are pointing to this, and in this book, usually if something points that way, that's exactly where it's going, which makes it like really easy to follow. The foreshadowing is delightful and lovely, and this was just sort of something that seemed a little bit out of left field. But also it's something that's not addressed in this book, so I think later in the series we'll know more about it.
Well, I think it's that his blood allowed the tooth to be preserved in the same way that Ashland's blood activates the thread.
Yeah.
Because he's that special thing. But yeah.
Dragons are interesting and their magic is interesting, and they explain a little bit of in this book, which I appreciate. I hate it when people keep their cards too close to their chest. By people, I mean authors keep their cards too close to their chest, and it kind of muddies the water of the story they're trying to tell. But I think this does a really good job of giving you a little bit as you go along, so you feel like you're learning more about this book in a way that's commiserate with the action in the book. This just was like a little thing that threw me, but I really do think it's just something we'll read about in later books.
Yeah. When he wakes up, Felgar sneaks in and picks the locks on his manacles, so he sneaks in through a vent. And Bershad is like, why did you save me? He's like, dude, you got your leg cut off. Like, that's crazy. I needed to save you.
Felgor's like, I'm your friend. I also saw all the torturing and it made me throw up, a thing I do frequently, but that doesn't matter. It was super gross and I love you and I don't want to watch you get cut into tiny pieces. Please leave with me. And he's like, I will, but 1 second. And then he lights all of the ballistas on fire and so basically sets the entire castle on fire, and then they peace out. It's so good. I love it.
Yeah, they realize that the ballistas are being stored right under the giant cog that powers the entire city. So as that heats up, it causes the cog to stop. So they're able to sneak out, and Bershad's like, okay, where do we go? And then the cog stops, and he's like, well, all of the checkpoints are down now, so it's going to be really easy to get out. And they make for a ship. And then we cut back to Ashlyn. She is holding council. Things aren't looking very good for her. They're under siege. A lot of people have died. Catapults have been effective. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to duel Cedar Wallace in a chalk circle tomorrow. Send word to him. I'm sure he will say yes. And that night she takes out a vial of God's moss. And we're like, ooh.
She's been practicing and she's like, this is what this practicing is working out for. And she's like shadowboxing with lightning in her tower. And you're like, Cedar Wallace is about to get fucking wrecked.
Yeah. We then cut to Garrett. He meets with Lincoln and he tells him, he's like, you don't need to kill Ashlyn anymore. Cedar Wallace is going to do that. I need you to kill Cedar Wallace after he kills Ashlyn now. So we are confirmed. We both had a conversation where we were like, Lincoln is Garrett's employer, right? And this is where it's confirmed that he is, in fact, his employer. Do you want to talk about the scene a little bit? Because it is kind of a funny scene.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because you could tell Lincoln's a little bit of a snake. He's been portrayed as not as strong as the other people, but he also asks for Mudhall, so you're like, oh, this guy is totally somebody who would hire an assassin and then wait in the shadows till everyone's done fighting to make a move. And then it's very clear that he doesn't believe anything he said to Ashlyn and that he actually sucks. And then also he's kind of a moron because he thought that he could just do all of this unrest and he kind of didn't plan for Cedar Wallace. And Garrett is also like, I need to kill the person that I'm supposed to kill. Garrett is completely motivated by his mission, and his mission is to kill Ashlyn, and he's really still trying to do it. And Lincoln's like, you don't need to worry about it. She's a girl. She'll just get murdered with her like little widow people. And Garrett is like drinking his respect women juice, and he's like, women are actually quite hard to kill, and are more competent than you think, which is kind of nice. Like, Garrett's evil, but not a dick.
He has his moral code. It's just different from everyone else's.
I like Garrett as a character. He's a real weirdo.
Garrett's a great character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think this is where we get the hint that Lincoln is not his actual employer. His actual employer is maybe the Emperor. So his orders to kill Ashlyn are coming from Lincoln, but they're actually coming from someone else, because Lincoln then talks about the plot to then ascend to the throne and then make a deal with the Emperor. So it seems like there is some manipulation happening with what Lincoln thinks he can achieve.
Yeah, Lincoln is also the one who set Cedar Wallace up to intercept Ashlyn's forces and kill them. He's the reason that Ashlyn has been outflanked, because he's been feeding information to Cedar Wallace.
He's the one who shot down all of her pigeons. He's the one who positioned archers on the wall. At the time, Ashlyn thought that they were Cedar Wallace's men, but they were actually Lincoln's men that were the archers on the wall during her coronation.
I think it's also implied that Lincoln is the one who pushed Cedar Wallace to try to usurp the throne in the first place.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Not like he's like the whole motivation. I think he was like, hey, with you and me together, we can get rid of this lady. I'm sure he said something much more disrespectful, but yeah, the guy you knew that was evil the whole time and was pulling the strings was evil the whole time and pulling the strings.
Yeah. Bershad and Felgor arrive in Floodhaven. They stole a ship and they get across the ocean. One of the Papyrian vessels catch them and is about to destroy them. And they're like, wait, we're here for Ashlyn. So then they take them to the city. And we cut to Ashlyn, and she is making sure that she's wearing no metal on her body. As she goes to the walk to the chalk circle, she's walking with Lincoln and some of her widows, and she tells them to leave her, that she wants to enter alone. When she meets Cedar Wallace, she asks him, she's like, hey, Lincoln is the one that betrayed me, right? Lincoln's the reason for all this, or not the reason for all this, but she's like, he's the reason I'm in such a dire position right now. And he's like, yeah, he betrayed you. They fight. She's just trying to avoid his swings for a bit. He's wearing full scale armor that's made of metal. He's swinging around a huge sword. And then she takes the vial of God's moss, smashes it against her wrist with the cord on it. So it breaks the glass and it bloodies her. And then she shoots him full of lightning.
Yeah, it's really cool scene because she kind of fires off 2 small blasts, and then he's immediately like, oh shit, she's a witch, help me, mommy, help, because he's like, oh, I fucked up, like, this bitch is gonna kill me. And then he like is pleading to his guards on the side, which is like, so delightful, because this guy sucks so hard.
Yeah.
It is just like this awful person, and he's like, please help me, and they can't break the circle because it's like an honored thing, they're afraid of the gods. And then she just absolutely fucking smokes him. Like, they talk about his armor being white, like it had been in a armor's forge for an hour. This dude is wrecked. And then at that point, all of his soldiers are like, charge! And then she kills an entire army with one blast. She just destroys them. She like has a level 5 fireball or something on him, except for it's lightning, and just absolutely wrecks an entire army, which is crazy because we've had scenes in this book where they've had to kill like 4 or 5 people, and it's this like knockout drag out match where it's just a war of attrition, and it's so hard, and like the human body is so crunchy but then also really difficult to kill in an instant, and she just wipes out like 200 people. It's so cool for a climax, and it also is just so earned as a raise in tension and violence. I really like it. It's a really great scene.
Yeah, it was a really great scene. He not only, like, his armor not only melts, he also is flung into the air and he lands in a different place under a different perspective. Like, there's a different perspective when he lands and they're like, oh shit, that's Cedar Wallace, which is really a great way of describing that scene. The widows then run to circle her. So they're running across the field. Garrett is standing with Lincoln. He's in a guard's uniform and he's like, you need to charge her right now. She's wounded. She's weakened. You can see that she's weakened. And Lincoln then rouses his men. He's like, are we going to let a witch and a woman take the throne? And he gets them to all charge. And then he scoots under the gate and goes back into the castle while they charge.
Yeah, brave Sir Lincoln runs away. He bravely runs away, away. This moment, Burchard rests over the hill, so we get his perspective of the battle.
Yeah, they get to the ramparts and Felgor is like, how can I help? And he's like, no, you're done. You don't need to do anything. And Felgor's like, excuse me, sir. Let me know how to help. And he's like, okay, well, there's a hidden harbor. And he's like, okay, great. I'm going to steal a boat. I'm going to be waiting for you. Just come to the harbor. Meet me there. I'll be there. And this is when the Malgrave captain, who is a loyal captain to the Malgraves, which is what the ruling family, he's like, all right, are we going to let fucking Lincoln be our ruler? No. And then they all charge as well. So Burchard charges with them. And so the Lincoln's men are starting to get sandwiched between the widows and the loyal guards. Burchard then fights his way to Ashlyn. He's struck by multiple blows, but many of them heal because of the god's moss. As this is happening, Garrett uses a rope to pull Ashlyn away from the cover of the widow, so he lassos her and yanks her through. And he's like, I can't believe she's not dead from that, but whatever, I'll kill her with this dagger. But Burchard is able to reach him and he stabs him with a spear and he's thrown to the side. He then pulls the rope off of Ashlyn. She's smoking, literally, like her mouth is smoking and her nostrils are smoking. But then Garrett gets a dagger into Burchard's chest and disappears.
It's like a really great reunion because both Ashlyn and Burchard, the last time they met, holding secrets in them. Burchard about his healing and Ashlyn about the thread and the electricity. And both of Ashlyn is like smoking from all of the lightning she's conjured, and Burchard has like a bunch of like fatal wounds, and he's like, oh, actually, it'll heal. They both are like, oh, we're super powered now. That's crazy. But they also get to be like open with each other and reunited. It's kind of nice. It's like, God, things are crazy, but we're together and we're magic. That's great.
So they are able to take down Lincoln's wardens, but another group charges out, and Ashlyn is able to shoot the lord who's leading them and stuns the rest, but then she passes out because she's kind of overdone it. Burchard carries Ashlyn. He still has the knife in his chest. He carries Ashlyn. They flee. He tells Hayden and the other widows, I think Hayden is with them, but he tells the other widows and the guard that are still loyal that they need to all scatter and go in different directions because that will make sure that not everyone's just following them.
It'll hide their retreat.
And hide their retreat, yeah. And they are pursued to the harbor. They're about to be overrun, but the Piperian ships then shoot all the wardens who are pursuing them. And we learn that Felgor was able to get that Piperian ship to come there. And he's like, hey! They are able to get Ashlyn to the ship. Burchard, it's described he's like drowning in his own blood because of where the dagger is in his chest. It's filling his lung. And someone says, like, I think it's in his heart. But Felgor, when they get onto the ship, he's like, is that God's moss on Ashlyn's arm? And Hayden says yes. And so he scoops it up and then he pushes it into Burchard's wound. And then when Ashlyn wakes, again, it's in her perspective. Burchard is beside her on the ship. His wound is fully healed. And they catch up and tell each other all of their secrets. Felgor then appears and tells them that they should come up onto the deck. They watch as thousands of dragons fly overhead for the Great Dragon Migration, and they admit their love for each other and decide to go to Papiria.
Beautiful scene that really sets up the second book. I think is great. I like Ashlyn and Burchard together, and I think it's really great that the next book will be about her retaking her country back from Lincoln.
Yeah. They also say that they want to find out what's going on with the moss, too. They have questions about their abilities. And then we cut to Kira and Vera. And they are being taken to a hidden harbor with Osiris. And Kira's like, wait till you see this, Vera. And he raises a boat from the water. It's fastened to either a dead dragon or parts of a dead dragon that he somehow was able to preserve. And it lifts into the air and is able to fly. And Vera's like, what?
Vera's also like, oh, this will break any siege. This is it. This is a game changer.
Yeah. And Kira's like, imagine looking down at all the people from this thing. Because she's kind of scary. And then the book ends. That's how it ends.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We talked a lot about the writing. Was there anything else you wanted to say?
I think just a quick recap. There's a lot of detail and texture in this book. There's a real grittiness to it, focusing on blood and shit and bile and how physical that is, that I think really works with the themes of the story that I really liked. I talked a little bit in the beginning about his choice to use to rot instead of it, but I just think the prose is like really great. I didn't really sit with it a lot because I was listening to this book mostly. It's a great audiobook, by the way. I think the reason I thought the guy's name was Burchard is because it's said the audiobook is in a British accent and they hide all their R's, so I threw one back in as like weird American translation of English, but that's not important. They do a really good job of building on the story itself. The characters felt real and lived in. All of the chemistry felt earned. I talked about the switching of POVs, but I thought it really improved and enhanced the story, and I think it was really great technique. I don't know, I thought this was just a really delicious book to read, and it's just so nice to read competently written books.
So in the interview I listened to, the author talked about how important he finds editing his book, and he encourages reviews and revisions of every scene, no matter how much you like it or how important it is to you as the author. He talks about how everything is potentially expendable or changeable, and he says that his view on editing really changed when he learned that in The Simpsons, in their earlier seasons, the writers of The Simpsons would sometimes go through 20 drafts of a joke before they finalized the script for the episode, and that's why the episodes were so polished and layered. And he talks about how important his editor is, and we talk about that a lot in this podcast. And but the editing in this book, you can tell how polished it is. It's so polished, this book is. Everything feels like it's laid in really well. There's no plot point that feels like it was just thrown in and then immediately then applied in the next scene. Even if you know something is going to be used, for example, the god moss in his hair, you're like, is he going to use it here? Is he going to use it here? Is he going to use the god's moss here? So you're thinking about it, but it is something that was layered in earlier so that you have this buildup of tension and this buildup of knowledge before this object is just immediately brought into the plot again.
You want to talk about the dragons?
Yeah, let's talk about the dragons. I talked about this a lot in the beginning, but the dragons are a form of apex predator, and he really did his research on how apex predators usually are over hunted because they're seen as dangerous, they're seen as disruptive to places where humans congregate and to systems that humans create, like farming and ranching. They really feel like wolves, but also whales in their use, because a whale was really valuable at the time and was much more efficient than any of the other oils, including synthetic oils that were produced even in the 1900s. And that was really lovely to see such a deep understanding of the environmental impacts of an animal being removed from the environment, and to have that be such a major theme in the book. It was just really fun. I really enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, these are really animal dragons. There's still characterization in the short dragons that we do get to see, the put offishness to them. That's really great. I like that they're like weirdly magic, but we don't know yet what's going on with that. I think that's always very cool.
Yeah, they do feel like they have a lot of characterization, and the different species of dragons also feel really distinct from each other, even though we might get just one very short glimpse into a species of dragon in one single scene. You still really understand how different it is from another dragon that appears in a different scene, and how it relates to its environment and the people within that environment, as well as the other parts of that ecosystem in a unique way.
This book has a lot of different, really fleshed out habitats where people live, and they also lead to different dragons, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just great. I hope we see more dragons, but I feel like this is the best dragons we've seen where the characters are outwardly antagonistic to them. They still feel very fleshed out. In the animal ones, obviously in The Priory of the Orange Tree, those are like good dragons that are villains, but they're actual characters. This is the first time we've sort of seen an antagonistic relation with dragons where they are sort of purely animalistic, but we still see a lot of care to the way that they're described, and they do feel more like wolves or bears than they do a mythical creature. The warrens are really cool. I don't know if that's playing off the horde. We don't really see any hoarding or that, but I think that they have these warrens is really cool, and I think we'll see more of it in the next book, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I agree with everything you said. In the very back of the book, I don't know if this was part of the audiobook or not, they have this little grouping of notes. I'm just flipping through the pages right now, that he compiled, where he has a description of all of the dragons mentioned in the book. And the description is from both Bershad's field notes and Ashland's field notes. So Bershad's is really like, this is how you kill this creature. This is what you need to do to kill it. And then Ashland's is very much more like, this is what I have observed through my dissections and my field observations of this creature. So it's also coming from this really two different perspectives of how dragons are viewed in this culture, which was really, really, really quite lovely, because he could have just had an appendix that was like, the needle nose Verdun is green and blah, blah, blah. It has orange eyes and blah, blah, blah. But instead he wanted to show it through the characters' eyes and their experience. And that was amazing. Such a great way of not only describing these dragons, but describing their place in the world and the way that they're perceived by humans.
I love a fake bestiary. That's great. I didn't see that, but good to know. Do you want to get to your nitpick?
Oh, I just have like a really little nitpick where I don't think Alfonso was well constructed in a book that really seemed like it focused so deeply on animals and ecology and the characterization of animals, where the dragons had so much character and personality and uniqueness when they just appeared in a scene, and then Alfonso the donkey didn't really feel like he needed to exist. And there were things in it like donkeys don't chew their cud. It mentions that he chewed his cud. Donkeys are notorious for being spooked and frightened at simple things, and maybe this is an exceptional donkey, but horses can't vomit, and I'm pretty sure that donkeys can't vomit either. If you have a donkey or you know about donkeys and you're like, actually, donkeys can vomit, let me know. But I'm pretty sure that donkeys can also not vomit, and that's something that happens in the book. So I feel like he didn't really feel like a believable animal to me, not just because of those facts that were incorrect, but he's just kind of there, and then he wasn't because he was killed. And I just feel like in a book where the author did such extensive research to make the dragons feel real and the pigeons feel really realistic, he could have done like a little bit of research about donkeys.
Yeah, I kind of thought that the donkey was like the bird character from Moana, where he just kind of exists to be adorable in a very silly, dumb way. So it did bother me, but I am taking your nitpick. That's basically the only problem we have with this book.
Yeah, and that's such a nitpick. Like, whatever. This book was great. I really enjoyed it. We do want to read the second book. We're not going to read it next because it was so violent. We need a little bit of a break from the gore, but we really, really enjoyed it. Sanctuary was wonderful, and we really enjoyed Sanctuary, and that felt like a palate cleanser, but this also felt like a palate cleanser, especially since I read a lot of fantasy that has been published more recently, and I think that if you were another person, a listener who reads a lot, you'll notice that the quality of editing and the quality of finishing and storytelling has gone down, and that's not necessarily the fault of the authors, but more the fault of the publishing companies and the push to be published instead of ability to kind of sit with the work and work on it. I'm not going to get into all of that right now. But then to go back and read a book like this, that was absolutely a labor of love by the author and took the time it needed to make it really, really good. Oh my gosh, it was amazing to read.
Yeah, we've said it the whole thing, but we would definitely recommend this book. All right, so this has been Blood of an Exile by Brian Naslund.
What are we reading next, JoJo?
So we are reading a much different book. We need a palate cleanser. We will definitely read book 2. I am very excited for it, but I need a little bit of break from bones sticking out of people's bodies. We are going to read After the Dragons by Cynthia Zhang. Do you want to talk about why we picked it?
This book also carries a lot of the environmental themes that we were picking up on in Blood of the Exile, where it's talking about dragons as part of an environment and their exclusion from it or removal from it, exacerbating issues within the environment, which we thought was really interesting, but it is a much shorter book. It's a novella instead of a novel. It's our first novella, I think, for the podcast, so it should be a fairly quick journey, where this book was quite long. The Blood of an Exile was quite long. So that's all we have today. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and hit the subscribe or follow button.
What were your thoughts on Blood of an Exile? Would you recommend this book to others? Let us know in the comments or tell us what other dragon books you would like to read. Bye, everybody.
Bye!